Welcome back to the channel. So, shockingly to nobody, after I finished the last video, I found I still had a little bit more to say on part 3. So I just wanted to make this video. It should be much shorter than obviously a full in-depth look at the part. But I just wanted to mainly go over really one thing in particular, this reference to the Jaghut Tyrant that we see that causes Tattersail to act in such an extreme way that she'd, sacrifice her own life to what she believes anyways in an attempt to stop or slow down what she believes is the adjuncts and Tayshren's plan to awaken this Jaghut Tyrant. And then also I'll be taking towards the end of the video a look at the excerpts at the start of each of the chapters, because especially in this part, I think those give some pretty unique insights into or little hints, because we know Erikson doesn't come out and tell us really anything straightforward, but I think the excerpts in this part give some unique perspective and can give us little hints and little nuggets of knowledge that can kind of reveal some aspects of a couple members of the vast cast of characters that Erikson is slowly introducing and we're getting to know along the way. So figured that was a worthwhile reason just to do an additional, part 3.5 video, if you will. So without further ado, like I said, I just really want to take a closer look at the Jaghut Tyrant that is kind of, at this point, seems to be really moving our plot forward, and it is potentially the major conflict that we may see, just based on how extreme Tattersail, like I said, obviously felt the need to go to a very extreme length just to slow down Tayshren. So if you do have the mass market paperback, which really, these are like the only copies that I've been able to find really anywhere is mass market paperback. Just a little side note there. I haven't, let me know if you know of, are there even hardcovers for Malazan? I'd love to get some really nice copies, but these are really the only thing I've come across. So if you do have the mass market paperback, I do just want to cover the contents on page 309 because we really get the most insight into a little bit of Jaghut culture and the idea of these Jaghut Tyrants. We still don't know a whole lot about them, but it gives a pretty good basis of kind of how feared they are. So let's go ahead and take a look at what Erikson had to say, and it is when Tattersail is confronting Beledrin on the plains, and that really gets things going here. So obviously we know that Tayshren had told Beledrin to look through these scrolls. Beledrin has Jaghut blood, we know, based on what he tells Tattersail, and that's really where this conversation kicks off here. So Beledrin goes, "Very well. Among the archives collected from the city's mages, all of whom were executed, as you know, were found some copied fragments of Gothos's Folly, an ancient Jaghut tome." So we know we're dealing with a Jaghut tome, and just to, like I said, the excerpts are becoming more and more important. So if that name sounds familiar, you may, and you've got impressive reading recollection if you do remember this. So on page 87 of the mass market paperback, the excerpt right before chapter 3 is actually from Gothos's Folly. So we know it's a Jaghut tome. So assuming Gothos is, a Jaghut, we really don't know anything else about him. But the excerpt on chapter 3 goes, "Thelumin, Tartheno, Toblikai, find the names of a people so reluctant to fade into oblivion. Their legend rots my cynical cast and blights my eyes with bright glory. Cross not the loyal cage, embracing their unassailable heart. Cross not these stolid menhirs, ever loyal to the earth. Thelumin, Tartheno, Toblikai, still standing, these towering pillars mar the gelid scape of my mind." So doesn't give a whole lot away. To be honest, that doesn't reveal a whole lot. It may. It's just something to keep in mind later on as we learn more and more. But as of right now, we have no mention of Thelomen, Tartheno, or Toblachi. But just, I thought it was, important to bring up because we do actually see the text of Gothos's Folly. But this definitely piques Tattersail's interest and, pretty much sets off some red flags. So she replies, I know of it, go on. And Beledrin says, as a Thelomen, I possess Jaghut blood. So we do see our first reference to Thelomen, which obviously were just referenced in that excerpt from Gothos's Folly in chapter 3. Though, of course, Gothos would deny it. The High Mage entrusted the examination of these writings to me. I was to seek out information concerning the burial of a Jaghut Tyrant, a burial that was in fact a prison. So it's like, okay, well, now we know whatever this Jaghut Tyrant is, that it was important enough that that they were imprisoned. So Tattersail replies, wait, the Jaghut had no government. What do you mean by tyrant? And then he says, one whose blood was poisoned by the ambition to rule over others. This Jaghut Tyrant enslaved the land around it, all living things, for close to 3,000 years. The Imas of the time sought to destroy it and failed. It was left to other Jaghut to attend to the sundering and imprisoning of the tyrant. For such a creature was as abominable to them as it was to the Imas. So now we really get a good idea. This Jaghut Tyrant is bad news, saying he enslaved the land around it for close to 3,000 years. So obviously a being that's, has a very long, if not immortal lifespan, and powerful enough to enslave a people for 3,000 years. And as we know, the Imas, we haven't learned a whole lot, but there's there's several references to this ancient conflict between Imas and Jaghut. So obviously these two people do not get along. And the Imas, even as stated there, they sought to destroy the Jaghut Tyrant, and they turned to the Jaghut, who obviously are their enemies, to imprison, it because they couldn't get the job done. So I found that very interesting. And then, like I said, we've got to take as much as we can from these little sections because Erikson doesn't info dump. So based on this here, we know Tattersail's surprised by the idea of a Jaghut Tyrant because they have no government, she says. So it sounds like they're, a very scattered, maybe loosely organized group of people. And these tyrants are kind of anomalies among their people and culture. So yeah, just found that, like I said, we have to glean a lot from these small little details because Erikson doesn't give away a lot. So at the mention of that, that's where Tattersail really starts to panic. She says, where was this tyrant buried? Beledrin, I concluded that the barrow lies south of here in the Gadrobi Hills directly east of Darujistan. Oh, Queen of Dreams, Beledrin, do you know what you've done? I've done as I was commanded by our High Mage. So Beledrin just thinking, I'm a good soldier, just doing what I'm told. And Tattersail replies, and that's why the Talanimas is with the adjunct. I don't understand what you're saying, Tattersail. And she replies, damn it, you brainless ox. They plan to free the tyrant. Lauren's sword, her Odoteral sword. Beledrin said they would do no such thing. Rather, they seek to prevent someone else from releasing it. Yes, that is more likely. It is the truth of things. Now, Tattersail, our conversation is done. I can't go back, she says. I must go on. Please don't stop me. So Beledrin maybe a little bit naive, just doing as a soldier's told for whatever reason. Tattersail, at hearing this, firmly believes that Tayshren's scheme and the adjunct scheme is to release, maybe somehow try and control this tyrant, and that causes Tattersail to essentially sacrifice herself in an effort to slow them down. And I just found it, as I mentioned, this is probably the pivotal, this page and a half is probably the pivotal point in what we've seen so far. just based on how extreme Tattersall's actions were, and then also the results from this conflict with Beladrin, the column of fire, the soul shifting into the seemingly soul shifting into Night Chill, and how this column of fire is seen by like all the major players. We see, Tak the Younger, the adjunct, see it, go and examine it. Crone, sees it. And she even references, there's a great converging of powers, and, once again, leading to this idea, we're headed towards something. We're headed towards a pretty major conflict, it would seem. And I just thought, especially on these read-along videos, that it's an easy, like if you tune out for, 2 pages here, you could very easily get lost in what seems to be one of the major conflicts of the book thus far. So that's why I just wanted to make this quick, shorter video. And then at the end here, like I mentioned at the start, I do just want to touch on these excerpts because in chapters 8, 9, and 10, because like I said, they you get little gems every once in a while. Sometimes like the one I read out of Gathos' Folly, I personally, I don't get a whole lot out of that, but it may be one to come back to. I just thought it was worth reading since we obviously saw that in chapter 3, an actual what the part of the text actually says, and then Tattersall's reaction to Beladrin, examining parts of Gathos' Folly. So I thought it was relevant. But let's go ahead and see what we can figure out of these excerpts. Starting at chapter 8 here. Let's see. So it goes, he stepped down then among women and children, or among women and men, the sigil stripped in her foul cleansing. There on the blood-soaked sand spilled the lives of Emperor and First Sword. So tragic this treachery. He was of the old guard, commanding the honed edge of the Empire's fury. And so in stepping down, but not away, he remained the remembrance before her eyes, the curse of conscience she would not stand. A price was placed before him that he glanced over in first passing, unknowing and so unprepared in stepping down among women and men, he found what he'd surrendered and damned its reawakening. So, and then this is from The Bridge Burners by Tak the Younger, who we've obviously also seen in this part. So based on the fact that it's about the bridge burners, it's pretty an easy leap to recognize that this little excerpt is about Whiskey Jack, since we learn that Whiskey Jack was once the commander of the bridge burners, not just a sergeant, and he was actually commander, and Dujek was under him, and they kind of flipped those roles, it would seem. So we know it's about Whiskey Jack, and we can we also see here that we know Lysine seems to have had the Emperor and the First Sword murdered, and Whiskey Jack stepped down at that point, it would seem, based on this. And it's kind of one of the reasons why it would seem that Lysine wants to eradicate the bridge burners is because this idea that they're a constant reminder of the crime she committed and the murder she seemingly committed to take the throne. And then I obviously think he, especially based on this, by stepping down into, the regular women and men, he's held in very high esteem among the people, which obviously for an emperor trying to retain the throne can be seen as pretty threatening. So that kind of gives us more insight into Lysine's motivation. She's been, kind of the person behind the curtain. We know the adjunct is essentially an extension of her will, and we also know Taishren is seemingly on the side and working together and with the adjunct based on what we've seen in this part as well. So that gives good insight into not only Whiskey Jack, but also a little bit more insight into Lysine as a character as well. All right, so let's see what the excerpt at chapter 9 has to say here. And yes, this one. All right. So this one goes, have you seen the one who stands apart, cursed in a ritual, sealing his kind beyond death, the host amassed and whirling like a plague of pollen? He stands apart, the first among all, ever veiled in time, yet outcast and alone, a Tlan Amas wandering like a seed unfallen. And this is from Lay of Onus Tualan by Tak the Younger. So this obviously is referring to Tul. We know that the emperor had used Tlan Amas army. Tlan Amas army in his original conquest. And we know it's unusual for Tlan Amas to be wandering alone. Obviously, Tul is wandering alone and working side by side with the adjunct. So this gives a little more insight into the Tlan Amas. I think it's interesting and noteworthy that they're referred to as a plague of pollen. They're obviously very ancient beings, undying. So I'm sure they've had influence and impact on the world in their ancient history. So that's just once again gives additional context to not only Tul but a little bit more insight into the Amas people as a whole. And then last but not least, I did read this one out in my original video. It's the excerpt at chapter 10, and it's about Kalar, but I thought we'd take a little bit of a deeper look because we only get one brief scene with Kalar, and he leaves us not feeling the best. It's when, and I talked about this in my previous video, but it's when, Kaladin Brood leaves, and right after Kalar told him to kill Anomander Rake, and then as Kaladin Brood leaves and is out of earshot, he says, this is my last warning. So it seems to be a pretty ominous figure, but and is acting almost as like the right-hand man to Kaladin Brood, who seems to have fairly noble intentions as far as we know so far. But and I say that because we know the Malazan Empire, they're basically just conquering Genebacus, and Kaladin Brood is trying to resist. So he's, kind of taking the side of, these are these people were basically minding their own business before the Malazan Empire came in and kicked the door in and tried to essentially conquer them and envelop them into their empire. All right, so this one goes, Kalar said, I walked this land when the Tlan Amas were but children. I have commanded armies 100,000 strong. I have spread the fire of my wrath across entire continents and sat alone upon tall thrones. Do you grasp the meaning of this? Yes, said Kaladin Brood. You never learn, and this is from Conversations of War. Second in command, Kalar speaking with Warlord Kaladin Brood, recorded by Outrider. So once again, this, and I mentioned this in my previous video, but this just gives further context to the relationship between Kalar and Kaladin Brood. Seems pretty contentious, considering, he's not... He clearly has strong convictions, and even though he's technically underneath Kaladin Brood, he's not the most... he's not going to stand by idly if he disagrees with what Kaladin Brood is saying, essentially. And it's also interesting. So based on this, we know, so he walked the land when Tlan Amas were but children. And we know the Tlan Amas are like ancient, hundreds of thousands of years old. They did a ritual that basically gave them immortality, and now they're just essentially walking skeletons. So that kind of begs the question, what exactly is Kalar? And we don't really have a good idea as of right now. We've barely seen anything of him. But this especially, he seems almost tyrannical, based on, this here. So I have spread the fire of my wrath across entire continents and sat alone upon tall thrones. So I think that speaks to he's willing to basically wipe out and exterminate people based on the fact that he sat alone upon tall thrones. So, and Kaladin Brood, in hearing that, says, yes, you never learn, basically making the same mistakes over and over again. It would seem he's implying there. So that's pretty interesting. And it's going to be exciting to learn more about what exactly Kaller is. Is he some sort of god or ascendant or what? It begs the question, like, what gave him this seemingly immortality? So, I thought all that was noteworthy and worthy of a second video, a part 3.5, if you will. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you have any non-spoiler further insights into the excerpt from Gothos' Folly in chapter 3, let me know, because that one kind of was way over my head, but maybe you guys know something I don't or I didn't catch. So let me know what you think, and I will catch you in the next one.